Okay, so let's kick off. Remember last week we kicked off with a bit of a funny question to get, comfortable and to give us an insight into you guys. So can you tell us what are some habits that surprised you about each other when you got married? Let's go. Who's going first?
I think what surprised me about Jay
Is surprise code for annoyed?
Yeah.
Okay.
was his inability to read my introvertness. And it'd be like, I remember one time we got back from a week-long summer camp of like we ran the camp. It was exhausting. We didn't have bedtimes. It was like maybe 3-4 hours sleep per night. And I was like, oh my goodness, on the way home on our street, I'm so tired. I just can't wait to go home and relax. What was your response to me?
Oh, me too. I'm wrecked.
Yeah.
I was so tired. I was like, oh man, I'm dead.
Yeah.
Done.
And he's like, so I've invited heaps of people over so we can just relax. I said, are you joking? And he goes, yeah, we need to just switch off, chill out. Oh my goodness. So literally, and we pulled up, there were so many people at our house already there. And I thought, wow, how many but we've made it to that point now where you're like, hey, are you cool if, and it's good now. But that just surprised me at the start.
What about you?
What about me? Yeah. Nothing. She's perfect.
Oh, come on.
I love it. Seriously?
Okay, one thing.
Yeah.
Okay, the one thing about Katie. There's actually a couple things. Do I do a couple things?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. Katie, when it comes to stacking the fridge, can't do it. She just can't, okay, what do I mean by stacking the fridge? I mean just putting anything in a fridge. It's like if Katie was left alone just to put stuff in the fridge. I don't know about you, but do people like a neat fridge? Yeah. I like a neat fridge. I just need my stuff in the right spot. I like things just in order, like vegetables with other vegetables. Yeah. Don't put steak in the vegetable drawer. Katie is the queen of just literally she'll go shopping and she'll just literally, I reckon this is what she does. I think she opens up the fridge, just gets a bag and just goes, just throws it as hard as she can. And just whatever goes in. If it falls out on the floor, good luck, all the best. That's dinner tonight. That's one thing. The other thing, no, we're going there. The other thing is toothpaste. With toothpaste tubes, Katie will leave toothpaste or is it a nozzle? Is it the head? I don't know whatever it is. It's for me, that thing needs to be clean. Because every time you reuse the toothpaste on your toothbrush, I want those are the bristles. I just want a nice layer there. This thing is there's 4,000 kilos of toothpaste on the head of the tooth. And then what she does is she closes the lid. And so it's now like a mushroom cloud of toothpaste on the top of the tip. I'm like, really? Those are the only two things. Outside of that, perfection.
Very insightful, guys. Thank you very much.
It's deep stuff.
Deep stuff.
So we're literally going from there into deep,
Yep.
Straight. So are you ready?
Yeah.
Straight through the chair. Let's go.
So tell us now. So we know that it's really important to keep God at the center of our marriages. Marriage is about focusing on God and helping both parties run towards purpose in God. So are you able to share some tips about how you practically do that? What does it look like for you both?
It's great. Go, babe.
Yeah, that's a good question. Look, at the end of the day, it is a heart thing, okay? So it's very hard for you to, I guess, copy and paste what another couple might be doing for that. But I think the best way I would say is probably the season that we're in is probably keeping each other accountable to that. And a big thing that we do is let's say, for example, I'm frustrated with someone, you can hear a bit of bitterness, you can hear a bit of unforgiveness. It's that, hey, have you prayed about that? Yes. Have you brought that to God? And also we like to discuss things that maybe we've read about in the Bible. Yeah. But I think, the season we're in is that season of, hey, I think you need to go spend some time with God. Let me take the kids, you go be with Jesus. Yes. And just
have you seen the fridge? Go pray. It's that kind of situation.
So I would say really looking out for each other in that sense and protecting each other's spiritual growth and it being both of our interests.
Yeah. I think as well, like, we know each other's schedules too. So, like, our calendars are synced, you know what I mean? So we're aware of what's going on with each other. And so I know it's daily, but I schedule in my time that I spend praying in the morning on a daily basis. And so Katie knows, our kids know that, you know, if we're reading the Bible, it's like, hey, Dad's reading his Bible. And it's like, if I want to go hang out, I need to bring my Bible into the room. So my kids know that. They know that I'm going to be praying. They know that worship's going to be on. And so we've created an environment where that's a priority. It's the first thing we do in the morning as a family. And so everyone's just aware of that. I think Katie sometimes, like, her mornings are different to mine. You know, I can structure that different because I'm at work, and sometimes she's waking up to a crying baby. And so it's not like I just have, you know, an hour to just pray before Ember wakes up, because Ember's like, ah, you know, like off the bat. So, you know, so Katie's time is a bit more flexible, but because we're aware of each other's time and we're aware of what we're doing and what our values are, we kind of work around that, and the family adjusts. And even little things like we have like a home pod in our house, and what that does, it just kind of pumps music to the whole house. And so every morning, without fail, worship's on first thing in the morning. So as soon as I get up, I normally get up first before the rest of the family. I'll put that on. I won't put it on too loud to wake everybody up. But while people are waking up, there's music there's worship that's happening. So we try to start our morning filling the house with an atmosphere of worship, an atmosphere of faith. So we just do little things like that make God the center of our lives. Does that make sense? And even things like church, like it's basic things like going, no, church is a non-negotiable. And so that makes our kids go
through every season.
Through every season. It doesn't matter what you got. The only way that you can get out of church is if you're going to make someone else sick. That's really it. And so for us, we're trying to teach our kids a valuable lesson that we kind of structure our lives around this. This is what's important. This is a priority. And this is how to keep it at the top of the list, you know? Yeah.
Thank you. It's a great answer.
No, thank you.
So then the next question, and go in as much as you want or not, but it's around keeping the passion alive for, you know, we want to build marriages that last for a lifetime, you know, many, many, many years by God's grace. How do you keep that connection alive? How do you keep the passion alive?
Sexually?
If you want.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, that's
Shane,
a good question.
You can say the word.
How do you maintain a healthy sex life
Shane's like, so
within the boundaries of marriage?
That's a good one. That's a good question. Look, to be honest, I think the misconception can be that it looks like Hollywood, you know, for 60 years of marriage, you know. Like, to be honest, Hollywood, their sex scenes are quite, like, I'm not sure, you know, that's not very realistic. Like pornography, you know, it's an unrealistic expectation. But like we were saying, sex is great and sex is wonderful, but sometimes you have to be more intentional. And that might sound weird to someone who's not married. They go, why would you be doing it all day? Like, why aren't you doing that? You know, but as you're married and as life happens, it's true. As you bring children into the picture too, that's a whole nother level of tiredness and exhaustion then. I think it just comes down to probably a lot of things that you do in marriage. It's being intentional, you know, and that sounds like a strange thing to do, but Jason brought up the Bible verse before about husbands giving themselves to the wives and wives to the husbands, and recognizing as a couple that your partner does have needs. And, you know, and trying to work within those needs. Now, there are ways too that as a couple you can help each other. Like, for example, if you keep hearing from your wife, I'm so tired, I can't, how about you help her not be so tired? So let me help you with the house so that you can be ready earlier. Or let me put the kids to bed so you can have half an hour to yourself, relax. You know, it's those sort of things that you're intentional about making that time. Now, that sounds strange. Like, I know some couples will schedule it in. It's a thing that they schedule. Date night, this, we're going to make sure it happens. So I think it's what works for you, what you're in agreement with as a couple, but it's important that you're in agreement. You know, if you've got a partner that's not feeling loved, you know, in many aspects, but sexually as well, then you need to address that as a couple. Yeah.
I think one of the key things, I'm going to say something that I don't know, I've heard some pastors say something completely different. So anyway, this is just our reality. So hopefully it helps someone. But so often we think like people have asked, like, how often should you have sex? And people are like, have it every day. Man, we don't have sex every day, right? And I think sometimes people have this expectation. And even like what you said, like I think you or one of you guys touched on this whole Hollywood concept. Pornography is fueled what sex looks like. And so we think it's meant to be this thing. Or we watch The Notebook and it's like my husband needs to get in a boat in the middle of the rain and just be like, I wrote you every day. Like that's real love. And so we have this idea of like what love is meant to be. And so we set these expectations. But I think one of the biggest words that you need to take out of today is this word seasonal, right? Seasonal. Everyone say seasonal.
Seasonal.
There are seasons in your life where, in the context of sex. So like if you're married, this is really important for you to hear. If you're not married, it's also important for you to hear, so take note. But, like when we first got married, our honeymoon, we won't go in, no details, right? But it was like, we didn't see the sun for 4 days. It was like, no, because it was just, what I'm saying was, it's just like you're newlywed.
It was really cloudy.
It was like, it was what?
It was really cloudy.
Yeah, it was. No, but look, okay, you said real talk, right? So we're talking real. I'm just saying, when you're newlywed, it's like, it's new for us, Katie and I. That was the first time we had sex in marriage on our wedding night. That was the first time that we'd done anything like that. In fact, that night was the first time, because we set our boundaries, we set restrictions when we were dating. And so that night was the first night we were in a room with the door closed by ourselves. That we'd ever been. We've never been in a room with the door closed by ourselves. So even that, we were like 10 minutes. Oh my God. So it was like, for us, it was a really like special moment for us. So, like newlywed, it's like that. Man, when you got 3 kids, like we're running a church now. I'm away for a week at a conference or leading or preaching somewhere. It's like I can't just fly back every night, have sex, go back to conference, and then, do you know what I'm saying? And so it's like, what you got to recognize seasons. Like, there are seasons where people are tired and people are exhausted, and it's not a bad thing. I think what's key is communication. It's like talking to each other and going, where are you at? How are you feeling? Are you good? Let's go. Nah, let's not. It's all right. So there are times where it's like, so you work it out as a couple. If you want it to be daily, go for it, man. If you got the energy, do it, right? Within those parameters, go for it. If you need to slow it down a little bit, slow it down a little bit. That's okay. But it's about communication, having that conversation, and just recognizing your seasons, recognizing that going, I'm not going to punish myself because I'm not having sex every day and I feel like I'm falling short of what other Christians think I should be doing. I think it's really important. Communication, seasonal, that's the key.
And I think expectations is something that is important to talk about in every area of your life.
Great.
But even sexually, like if we do a premarital course with people, like we'll say, like, what are your expectations for your honeymoon? And it's so funny. It's always very polar opposite. The girl's I'm going to get my nails done, get massages. And the guy's like, 5 times a day. We're just going to be in the hotel.
I'm going to rip your clothes off,
And the girl's
man.
like, what? What are you
calm
thinking?
down.
And we're like, okay, let's talk expectations now, and it's good to just be on the same page because sometimes the silence can create problems. And the silence, it's not meaning to hurt each other, but sometimes it can hurt each other. So I just think communication and loving each other selflessly is the key.
It's great.
And that's what it is. It's not having sex. It's making love. It's loving someone. And that's why if you can change your perspective on sex, you start to see that sex is not this self-satisfaction thing. Sex is actually a God-created, God-ordained special thing. I once heard a pastor say, and don't hear the carnality of this, right? But they said that having sex is the most like God we ever are. And the reason why he said that is because God is the only one who can create life. And so when we have sex with someone, it's the act of us creating life together. That's huge, that God would invite us into such a powerful creation. And so that's what this is. So recognizing that and recognizing the power of that and the importance of that then changes what you want out of sex. Sex doesn't become what can I take. It's actually what can I give.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you
good.
so much. Very practical. Do you feel like the ice has been broken? Relax. We've done the sex question. We can move on. So actually, no, there's one more kind of linked to that. So what about where there's been an affair in marriage?
In marriage?
Yeah, within a marriage. And you talked about saying sorry and the steps within that. How do you recover from infidelity if it happens?
That's a good question. That is very dependent on the different circumstances that people might find themselves and where they're at. I think it's dependent on if you have children in the picture as well. I know that's a motivator for reconciliation.
Yeah.
Biblically, it does say if your partner's cheated on you, you do not have to, divorce is an option.
Yeah.
But you might choose to fight for the marriage. But I think there's a lot of things that make up the broken trust. It can be, for example, how you found out about it. If you've discovered it and they didn't expose it themselves, that's a big trust breaker. That can take a lifetime to build that trust up again. It can be how many people, how often, those sort of things. I think it can look so different that it really does depend on the couple. I have seen people reconcile and move forward. I've seen people attempt to reconcile and then it just hasn't worked out because the trust is broken. But I would say I'd get straight with a mentor or someone who you can be really open with about it as a couple and you can talk it through. But I do think it looks different for everyone.
It's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, look, I agree with everything that you said. I would only add to that is that, divorce, the Bible actually speaks of it, that God hates divorce. And please hear me, right? It doesn't say that he hates people who are divorced. It's just this concept of divorce. Why? Because he loves marriage so much, cares so much about that sacred relationship, that when two people go into that and make it, again, it's that word covenant. It's not just an agreement. It's not like, hey, man, let's get married. Yeah, handshake. Yeah, all the best, let's do it, right? That's not marriage. Marriage is a covenant. It's a vow between two people before God. Where we go, God, you are the third. So God values marriage so much.
Yeah.
And that's why divorce, that breaking up of marriage, it so impacts God's heart. And so I heard a pastor once say divorce should be the last resort. And I think where possible, it should be. Now, that doesn't mean that if you're in an abusive relationship, you should stay in it. It doesn't mean that if your husband or your wife is cheating on you and because like Katie said, those are biblical grounds for divorce.
Yeah.
But what we've got to understand is if we marry someone, it should be lifelong. It should be, this is a forever decision I'm making. This is a sacred decision I'm making. This is not like, we think that marriage is all about the wedding day, where that is the smallest part of what marriage actually is.
Yeah.
And so it's not about all of those other things. It's not about the wedding day. It's not about a special moment. It's actually about doing life with someone, committing to them forever. And that is why divorce is treated the way it is. So I would say in that case of infidelity, I would chat to pastors and people in your world that you love and you trust. And what do they think? Like, bring them into your world and just go, is this salvageable?
Yeah.
Is there a relationship that can be had? Can we work towards something? Or is this just a pattern that is just going to keep destroying our relationship, destroying our family? And if it starts to edge towards that, then I think that's when you start to take on some of those conversations that Katie said, going, well, what are our next steps?
It's really helpful. Thank you.
So.
And just even to touch on that, because divorce is so prevalent in society and even within the church, but we know that, well, tell us, are there biblical reasons? We want to hear the Christian view or the biblical view for divorce. What are the, apart from infidelity?
Yeah. Do you want to say something?
No, you go for it.
Okay, so Matthew 5 and 19 talk about sexual immorality. So where there's adultery, that's one grounds for divorce. So really there's two.
Yeah.
And the second one's abandonment, which you can find in 1 Corinthians 7. And so those are the two main biblical kind of grounds for divorce. There is a conversation about abandonment and neglect when it comes to abuse and DV. And I think that is also something that should be considered. It might not have the Bible might not say if your husband's abusing you or your wife's abusing you, then leave right? That might not be biblical, but I think that's a reasonable ground. And I think you could actually go, well, that does look like abandonment as well.
Yeah.
And so I think those kind of reasons, sexual immorality, where there's been adultery, where there's been abandonment,
Yeah.
and where there's some form of abuse,
Yeah.
I would say those are pretty strong reasons,
Yeah.
biblical reasons as well, for divorce. But again, you got to bring it back and just go, okay, marriage is a sacred thing, not divorce.
Yeah.
Marriage is a sacred
Yeah.
thing. So how can we protect this? How can we keep this holy? And what do we need to do from there
Yeah.
to
It's
then
good.
make the right decision moving
Yeah.
forward?
It's good.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
All good, everyone? It's very quiet. There was this question that it's a bit hard, but it came through Instagram, so I'm going to ask it. It's around if your partner, so your husband, pressures you into sin within marriage. How do you deal with that? How do you say no when you know it's something against what God has said we can do?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it sounds like to me that he's not listening to what she's wanting. You know, like sin is sin, so we don't agree that's right. But if she's feeling pressured, and even like sexually, I think, I don't know if this question's related to even sexually sinning. Like it could be like, let's introduce someone else into the picture. Let's introduce a couple into the picture or whatever. Like it could be a pornographic drive that's gotten them there. And like what we talked about today, that's not the communication of being in agreement with each other. And yes, that falls outside of the boundary of what God's given us, but that falls out of the agreement and the sacredness of what your relationship's about. So I would just say, if you need to speak to your partner, okay? If that doesn't get heard, I think you need to ask to bring someone else into the conversation. Right. If that doesn't get heard, I think you're in a bit of a controlling relationship. And I think you need to explore that a little bit further. That if your needs and your desires aren't being listened to, I wouldn't say that's love necessarily in that area. Yeah. And I would be really asking some big questions about that. Yeah. Actually, just to follow up on that, what does bringing someone else in, what sort of, who? Like sexual. Like, okay, yep. I would say I would talk to your connect group leader. I would talk to maybe someone who's got a healthy marriage, and that you've seen a good dynamic between them. Anyone that shares the same values that you want to have in your relationship, I would bring them in. And I do want to touch on as well sexually. We live in an age where things are done in pornography that I think, especially women, a lot of them won't want to do. And that needs to be really communicated and understood, that that's not a healthy dynamic. And if your partner is saying, I don't want to do that, that means no. And I know we're talking a lot about consent and we're saying to educate our teenagers and all that sort of stuff. It's great. But we really, really need to be listening to our partners. If they say, I don't feel safe, I feel insecure in that position, I don't like the way you're touching me or the way you're doing that, that needs to be heard, because that is not love. It's good.
And I would even go further, like zoom out of it and just go like, what's part of that, the purpose of that relationship is iron sharpening iron. Yeah. So there's this accountability and there's this growth that takes place. Husband and wife, like Katie is not just my wife. Part of her job in my life and my job in her life is to make her, is to help her become a better believer, a better follower of Jesus, and her vice versa. So to lead one or the other into a sinful way of life, that's another problem that you need to be talking to a leader about or a pastor about. And so I think looking, like zoom out of it and go, what am I bringing to this relationship? Am I causing her to, or my wife or my husband, am I causing them to go further away from God? Or am I drawing them closer to God? Iron sharpens iron. Is that Proverbs 20-something? Proverbs 20-something. Go ahead and read it. Iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. So the wife sharpens the husband sharpens the wife.
It's good. Really good. Thank you. Actually, just going on from that conversation around what you find comfortable or what you're willing to do or what, is that something you would say have the conversation whilst you're dating or engaged or in marriage?
Oh, look, I'll be honest, I'm already teaching my daughter, not about sex, she's 5, but I'm teaching her. I'm like,
every day at the dinner table, it's like...
No, you know what? No, seriously, like recently, like we've got boundaries on her. The older she's getting, the boundaries are getting like, Anaya, please don't sit on people's laps. You know, like there's those sort of conversations.
Yeah.
The other day, it happened. I saw in a photo on Facebook, someone put it up, and I was like, Anai, why are you on this person's lap? Because I was in the room, I totally missed it. And she goes, Mum, it just happened. They just took a photo, put me on their lap, and took me off. I said, okay, I'm happy to hear, you know, you didn't instigate it, but I said, why didn't you say no? She goes, I didn't know how to. I didn't want to. And straight away, my heart sank. I was like, here we go. You know, this is these conversations. And I said, Anaya, and I said, Jace, actually, you have the conversation with her about saying no. Yeah. And we need to be, like, whether it's engaged, married, or whatever, we shouldn't be pressuring the partner into doing things physically that they don't want to do, especially women. I'm just going to, like, state the obvious.
Good.
You know, we should be teaching our daughters straight away. It's like, no, if you don't want to do that, then you say no. And that's a skill. Even when we see children, even at church, you know, people say, come here, hug me, do this, do that. It's like, no. If my kid doesn't want to hug you, I'm not going to make her hug you. You know, I'm teach them, high five you. You know, we should be teaching consent is a very important thing. From a young age. So I would say engage, if you're feeling pressured in engagement, pressured in marriage, those are alarm bells. And I think there's probably something else going on there. And I would say, hey, look, I think we need to be accountable with someone about this stuff. Let's go and talk to them. Like, I don't know if you guys remember, like, but even like in public transport, you know, you get touched in ways you shouldn't be touched. You know, like I remember going, catching the train to school. It was sort of like a joke of my friends. It's like, oh my gosh, that guy did it again, or that, do you see that old man or whatever? It shouldn't be normal for women. And it's a shame that it is. And now having a daughter, 2 daughters, I'm even more like, I will flip and drive you to school, because I remember catching the train to school. I remember how dangerous it was. And I think society sort of made it like women, it's just like, it's what happens, you know? But it shouldn't be that way. And as a church, we should really be leading the way in that. Yeah.
It's great. Thank you. It's great. Cool. So we're coming towards the end. Thank you guys very much. Have you guys found it useful so far? It's great. So last couple of questions then. I'll leave the hardest one till the end. It's around parenting. But there was a question around managing your finances well. And I know we had this session earlier in the year on finances, and you touched on that as well. Do you have any extra tips around managing finances well within a marriage as a couple? Anything extra to add on that one?
You know, Katie actually handles a lot of the finance in our house, which is like, you know, I look like an accountant. People are like, what?
He was an accountant, but I don't know why he gives me the job.
So what happened was, you know, when we first got married, I was handling everything. I had like spreadsheets and pie graphs, and this is how much we're spending on this, and so I had like a whole thing set up. And I found that Katie was checking the account like every day, whereas for me, I needed to like remind myself I got to check it every week. And so my headspace, the way I'm wired, the two of us, she calls me Jason Spendus, like, because I'm the spender by far. Like, I love shopping, I love buying stuff. Katie is the saver. If she could go on a holiday, her dream trip would be in a tent somewhere, where I'm like, let's go 5-star, like, let's go, right? So we're just opposite when it comes to spending. And Katie's headspace is always like just checking our account, making sure that everything's good. So what we did was we just switched it up. So instead of me like handling everything, she now runs the day-to-day. And she just she's got it on lock. She's unbelievable. But we still have budgets. We still budget things out. We still plan. We still save.
We talk about, I say, hey, this is how much, you know, we see this need here. Are we happy to be giving this amount? Yep. You know, it's sort
so
of
about every month we'll sit down, we have a conversation about it. It's almost like a business team meeting, right? and for us, it just works for us. And so we'd sit down, have a conversation, and then any kind of big spend, Katie will like submit the report, you know, or just have a conversation.
Yeah, like when we wanted to put our daughter into Christian schooling, that was going to be a financial commitment. And I said, hey, babe, like, you know, this is how much it's going to cost. I think we can do it. You know, I showed him the figures. So it was a team decision. So if it was hard one year, we're in it together. It's not like, well, Katie, why did you put her into a Christian school? You know, it was like us together making the decision and owning it. So I think that's important.
It's great. Thank you. It's good. Okay, so the very last question, and if you guys remember last week, we touched about trust. We talked about trust and how it's so important in every season. You talked about that. And this is a really good question, actually, because it's touching on the subject of fertility. And so what do you say to a couple who maybe they've been trying and they've not been able to conceive, and they're thinking, well, do we sit back and trust God, or do we take steps out there like IVF?
Yep.
Is there a biblical view on taking steps like IVF? What
Well,
do you guys
look,
think?
I think you're sort of getting technical there, because you could say that about any medical thing. You know, it's like, where's the line that we've decided? Now, I think it's like saying, oh, should I take, like, should I take, like I was on blood thinners while I was pregnant. Should I take Clexane because, is that lack of trust if I'm taking medication? So I don't think it's about a matter of lack of trust. I think that we're very blessed to be resourced, to be able to access things. The only thing I would say about IVF, I think it's fantastic. We've had many friends, pastors, friends who have gone through the IVF journey. I think it's fantastic. I was actually talking to a friend about it this week who's gone through IVF twice now, and she said the only thing that I say to people is just consider how many eggs what's the word when you fertilize? Yeah. She said, and I agree with that standpoint. She said, think about how many eggs you're fertilizing, because, look, Jason and I take the viewpoint that once the egg is fertilized, that's life. And I know for some people they might subscribe to 12 weeks is life, or when it's out of the world saying now when it's born, that is when it's technically alive. We subscribe to the egg and the sperm fertilized together, that's life. So that would be my only advice, is to not pull out and fertilize 30 eggs. I would think about going, how many attempts are we actually willing to have with IVF? And like, I know the friend I was talking to, I think they fertilized maybe 5 eggs. They've gotten 2 babies out of it. They've got 1 egg left. They say, we'll see what happens with this egg. But they're determined to use the eggs that they've fertilized. So that would be the only thing. Have a think about that. I think look into it for yourself and get the conviction. But I've known people who have gone and fertilized lots of eggs and gone, and then they've gotten a conviction and gone, oh my goodness, what do I do now with all these fertilized eggs? Do I donate them? Do I attempt to use them all? And that's something sometimes we don't think about with IVF until later. But I'm 100% pro the doctors, the medical system. I think we've got to be careful what we say is lack of trust and what isn't lack of trust. It's like sometimes as Christians we can be like, that's lack of trust, but hey, I'm on medication for this. And it's like, what's the difference?
It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Love it. Solid answer. I think she did really... Was that not a great answer? I think that was great.
Do you think it made sense? Like, does it help?
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
Do you guys think it makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it does for sure.
Great.
Beautiful.
Well, it's 7:31. Thank you all for listening so well. Thank you for sending in your questions.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
If you like.
Let's pray for everyone before we go. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Come on, Father God, we just thank you for every person in this room, anyone who's watching online. God, we just pray that as we've talked relationships, as we've talked sex, as we've talked parenting, and everything in between, God, I pray right now that you would help us keep you at the center of it all. Yeah. God, it's because of you. You love us, and so we now can love others. It's because you love us that we can love our kids and love our spouses and love our friends. God, our relationship with you is the most important relationship. And so, God, I pray that as Matthew 6:33 says, seek first the kingdom. I pray that everyone who's watching online, everyone in this room would seek first the kingdom of God. Seek first that relationship, and that we would recognize that because you first loved us, we can now love others. Help us keep you at the center. Help us in relationships. Help us in marriages. Help us in our dating relationships. Help us in our friendships. Help us to be the best people that you've called us to be. I pray this in Jesus' mighty name. Everyone said?
Amen.
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 Love you guys.
Thank you guys so much.
Next week will be good.